She came to Seoul with a scholarship and dreams of freedom. He came with power, darkness, and an obsession that would change everything. When Anaya's visa faced destruction, Ri Jong, a feared businessman with mafia ties, offered salvation wrapped in chains. But his price wasn't money. It was her. Forced into marriage with a man twice her age, a man who watches her like a predator, Anaya finds herself trapped in a gilded cage of luxury and control. She hates him. She fears him. She should escape him. But as his dangerous past unravels and his obsessive devotion reveals something terrifyingly real beneath the darkness, Anaya discovers a shocking truth. The line between possession and protection is razor thin, and her heart is dangerously close to crossing it. This is a story of obsession, redemption, and the kind of love that destroys and rebuilds you. This is The Bride He Stole from Youth. And welcome back to Afro-Korean Heartbeat Stories. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Like if you crave dark romance. Comment which ending you think awaits them. The scandal broke on a Wednesday morning like glass hitting marble. Anaya was in her statistics lecture, desperately trying to focus on probability distributions when her phone erupted. 17 missed calls. 32 messages. Her hands trembled as she read the headlines screaming across her screen in Korean and English. Host family business collapse. Immigration fraud. Foreign students under investigation. Her lungs seized. She couldn't breathe. The lecture hall suddenly felt airless, and the professor's voice became a distant hum beneath the roaring in her ears. She stood abruptly, knocking her notebook to the floor, and stumbled toward the exit. Other students turned to watch the girl with the panicked eyes rush past them, but she didn't see them. Anaya saw only the words repeating across her screen. The same devastating phrase, over and over, deportation pending. She had been in Seoul for exactly 8 months. 8 months of scraping together scholarship funds that barely covered her tiny room, working double shifts at a convenience store, eating instant ramen while sitting on the floor of her shared dormitory, studying until her eyes burned. 8 months of fighting, bleeding, hoping. And now, in a single morning, it was all crumbling. All of it. The visa fraud her host family had been running was about to obliterate her future. Anaya pushed through the university gates and walked aimlessly through the crowded Gangnam district, her phone still vibrating with incoming messages. She didn't answer. There was nothing to answer to. By tomorrow, immigration would be at her door. By next week, she'd be on a plane back to Lagos. Everything she'd fought for, the scholarship, the freedom, the chance to become someone other than what her family had planned for her, would be gone. She found herself standing outside a building she didn't remember walking toward. It was massive, all glass and steel, with cars that cost more than her university tuition lining the underground parking. A placard read Kim Enterprises in elegant lettering. She'd seen this building before. Everyone in Seoul had seen it. Ri Jong Kim's empire. The man was a legend in the city, dangerously powerful, impossibly wealthy, and ruthlessly private. She stood there for exactly 13 minutes, her shoulders shaking, watching her reflection fractured in the glass doors. This was rock bottom. This was the moment where the brave girl who'd left Lagos against her family's wishes finally broke. That was when he saw her. Ri Jong was on the 47th floor, reviewing contracts in a corner office that overlooked the city like a throne overlooking a kingdom. He was 45, with silver threading through his black hair, a scar that ran along his left temple from a business negotiation gone wrong 10 years ago, and eyes that had seen enough darkness to swallow light. He didn't notice the girl on the street at first. He was too focused on the numbers that represented his latest acquisition, a downtown property portfolio worth millions. But then his assistant, Park Min-jun, cleared his throat. "Sir, there's someone standing outside the building. She's been there for 10 minutes. Security is asking if you want her removed." Ri Jong didn't glance up. "A protester?" "No, sir. She appears to be crying." Something in those words, "appears to be crying," made Ri Jong look up from his papers. He turned his chair toward the floor-to-ceiling windows and focused on the street below. And there she was. She stood in a pool of afternoon sunlight, wearing a cheap university hoodie and worn jeans, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible. Her dark skin caught the light like silk, and even from 47 stories up, he could see the way her entire body trembled. She had thick, natural hair pulled into a loose bun, a young face with features that spoke of African heritage, and an expression so devastated that it looked like her entire world had imploded. And it had, although Ri Jong didn't know it yet. Something shifted inside him. Something dark and proprietary, like a predator catching the scent of prey that was already wounded. He leaned forward, his sharp features going impossibly sharper as he studied her. For 30 seconds, he couldn't look away. "Who is she?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I don't know, sir. Security says she's just been standing there. She's not attempting to enter the building." "Find out." Ri Jong didn't break his gaze from the window. "Everything. Name, background, why she's on my street looking like that." Minjun shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, that might be. Do it." Below, Anaya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and turned away from the building. She didn't see the man in the 47th floor window, the one whose eyes had just claimed ownership of her fate without her knowledge or consent. By that evening, Ri Jong knew everything. Anaya Okafor, 19 years old, from Lagos, Nigeria. Scholarship student at Seoul National University, studying business administration. Worked at the GS25 convenience store on Gangnam Avenue, 3 evenings a week. Lived in university housing, dormitory 4C. Clean record, perfect grades, no family in Korea. Visa sponsored by a now bankrupt host family. Deportation scheduled within 72 hours pending immigration review. She was, in every definition of the word, trapped. Ri Jong read through the file that Minjun delivered, photographs included, and felt something ancient wake up inside him. It was a feeling he hadn't entertained in years. The feeling of wanting. Not the shallow wanting of business acquisitions or beautiful women thrown at him by his associates. This was different. This was the kind of wanting that came from a place he'd carefully locked away after the last time it destroyed him. He told himself it was just curiosity. The girl had gotten his attention by standing outside his building like a lost ghost. That was all. But as he looked at the photograph, her university ID, where she smiled tentatively, her eyes full of hope, he knew he was lying to himself. He had seen youth like that before, years ago. He had held it, loved it, and watched it die in his arms. He had sworn he would never let anything that fragile, that precious, slip away from him again. Looking at Anaya's photograph, Ri Jong made a decision. 3 days later, Anaya sat in an immigration office, her passport clenched in her trembling hands, waiting for the officer to process her deportation paperwork. She had already said goodbye to her roommate. She had already contacted the university to withdraw. She had already booked a flight home, a one-way ticket that had cost her nearly everyone she'd saved. In 6 hours, she would be on a plane. In 24 hours, she would be back in Lagos, back in her mother's house, back to the life she had escaped. The officer was typing, the sound of the keyboard echoing in the small, gray room. He kept glancing at a folder on his desk, a thick folder with her name on it. "Ms. Okafor," he finally said, "I'm seeing something unusual in your file." Her heart stopped. "It appears you've been offered legal sponsorship. Someone has filed paperwork guaranteeing your visa status and accepting full financial responsibility for your stay in Korea." Anaya's throat went dry. What? That's not possible. I don't know anyone who. The paperwork is extensive." The officer pulled out several pages, each one official, stamped, notarized. "And the sponsor is, well, he's a very important person. Mr. Ri Jong Kim." The name meant nothing to Anaya. It meant everything. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I've never met this man." Regardless, the paperwork is in order. According to his legal team, he's offering you employment as his administrative assistant, with housing and salary included. Your deportation has been rescinded. You're free to stay in Korea. Free. The word was obscene in her mouth. She wasn't free. She was being saved by a stranger, which meant she would soon owe him something. She knew that much about the world. Nobody did anything for nothing. And when a powerful man saved a poor girl, the price always came due. But Anaya also knew what waiting for her at home in Lagos. A father who wanted to marry her off to his business partner. A mother who had already spent what little money they had on wedding ceremonies that would bind her to a man she'd met twice. A future that had been decided for her the moment she was born a girl. She looked at the officer. "When do I start?" Ri Zhang didn't contact her directly. That wasn't his style. Instead, a sleek black car arrived at her dormitory that evening, driven by a man in a suit who handed her an address and instructions to be ready within the hour. Anaya packed her few belongings into a battered suitcase and told herself she was being smart. She was protecting her visa. She was securing her future in Korea. She was making the practical choice. She wasn't acknowledging the fear that twisted in her stomach like something alive. The car pulled up to a building in the heart of Seoul, one of those luxury apartments that existed in a different world than the one Anaya inhabited. The lobby was all marble and gold, with an elevator that could only be accessed by key. The driver, who introduced himself as Park Min-jun, used a sleek black card to summon the elevator to the 47th floor. "Mr. Kim is expecting you," Min-jun said softly as they climbed. He didn't look at her, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. But Anaya could feel his curiosity, his unspoken questions about why his boss had summoned a girl who looked like she'd just wandered in from the street. The elevator doors opened directly into a penthouse. There was no hallway, no barrier, just the sliding doors opening into a space so vast and beautiful that Anaya's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Seoul glittering below them like a kingdom of lights. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, chosen by someone with impeccable taste and infinite resources. There was art on the walls, original pieces that probably cost more than her parents' entire house. And standing by the windows, his silhouette framed by the city lights, was Ri Zhang. He turned as she entered, and Anaya felt something primal in her recognize the danger. This was a man built of edges. His face was too sharp, too angular, too aware. His suit was tailored so precisely that it looked like it had been painted on him. His eyes, dark, penetrating, intelligent, took her in with the intensity of someone cataloging prey. "Anaya Okafor," he said. His voice was silk over glass. "Welcome to your new life." She felt her knees weaken. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" "Because I wanted to." He moved toward her with the grace of a predator, each step deliberate. "Is that not enough? People don't just help strangers like this. There has to be something you want in exchange." Ri Zhang smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile she'd ever seen. "How perceptive." "Yes, there is something I want. But not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we begin." "Begin what?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He was close now, close enough that she could smell him, expensive cologne mixed with something dangerous and dark. "Your new position. Your new responsibilities. Your new role in my life." "What role?" Anaya took a step backward, but he simply closed the distance. "That remains to be seen, doesn't it?" He gestured to Min-jun. "Show her to the guest suite. She'll stay here until the arrangements are finalized." "What arrangements?" Panic was rising in Anaya's chest now, clawing at her throat. "What exactly did you agree to help me with?" Ri Zhang's eyes were dark as a moonless night. "I agreed to keep you in Korea. To keep you with me. The details are negotiable. Get some rest, Anaya. Tomorrow, everything changes." She didn't sleep. She lay in a bed that was larger and more comfortable than any she'd ever experienced, in a room that was larger than her dormitory room, and listened to the sounds of Seoul breathing outside the windows. Part of her wanted to run. She could leave now, disappear into the city, find a way to stay in Korea on her own. But without his sponsorship, without the legal paperwork bearing his name, she was back to deportation. She was back to being trapped. And so she stayed, trapped in luxury, trapped by gratitude, trapped by the things she didn't say and couldn't understand. When morning came, Ri Zhang was waiting for her in the main living area. He was dressed casually for him, which meant designer jeans and a shirt that cost more than her monthly rent, and he looked at her like he'd been waiting for her his entire life to walk into that room. "Hungry?" he asked. "Not really," Anaya said. Her pride made her defensive. "I should probably be working. You didn't bring me here to feed me breakfast, didn't I?" Ri Zhang gestured to a table laden with food, fresh fruit, pastries, expensive coffee, everything a girl who'd been eating instant ramen could dream of. "Work is important, yes. But first, we need to discuss the terms of our arrangement. Sit. She sat, though it felt like walking into a trap. He sat across from her, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're wondering what I want from you, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I want you to stay. His voice was steady, matter of fact. I want you to work for me. I want you to live here in my home. I want you to be available to me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Available how? Anaya felt her face flush. If you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything criminal or immoral, Ri Zhang interrupted. His tone was almost patient, like he was explaining something to a child. I'm suggesting a contract. One that keeps you in Korea, keeps you employed, keeps you safe. In exchange, you remain accessible to me. You keep my company. You attend events with me. You become part of my life. That's insane. You don't even know me. I know you better than you think, he said. Something cold flickered across his face. I know that you left your family against their wishes because they wanted to control you. I know that you work 3 jobs just to afford a dormitory room because your pride won't let you ask for help. I know that you're brave and foolish and stubborn in equal measure. And I know that you're about to agree to whatever I'm proposing because the alternative is deportation and a life you've already decided you can't bear. He was right. God, he was absolutely right, and that was the most terrifying part. Anaya felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of this man. She would not show him how much power he already held over her. What happens if I refuse? She asked. You get deported tomorrow. Your visa sponsorship is revoked. You go home to Lagos and marry the man your father has chosen for you and live the life that was planned for you before you were old enough to have thoughts of your own. He said it so simply, like he was discussing the weather. Like he was laying out facts, not dismantling her entire world. And if I agree, then you stay. And eventually, you stop hating me. Anaya let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. That's not going to happen. Ri Zhang's expression didn't change. We'll see. Do you want to know a secret, Anaya? I'm very good at getting what I want. And I want you to stay. I want that more than I've wanted anything in a very long time. There was something in his eyes that terrified her more than anger would have. It was need. Raw, desperate, dangerous need. The kind of need that didn't care about her consent or her comfort or her dreams. The kind of need that consumed everything it touched. She signed the contract 3 hours later. It was 20 pages long, dense with legal language, outlining her employment, her compensation, her living arrangements. It also outlined something else, buried in paragraph 12, section 8. The employee agrees to marriage to Mr. Ri Zhang Kim within 60 days of contract signing as a condition of continued visa sponsorship and employment. This can't be legal, Anaya whispered, staring at the words. It is, Ri Zhang said. He was watching her with an expression of fascination, like she was a complicated puzzle he was solving in real time. I have had my lawyers ensure that every word is airtight. Marriage is not illegal here in Korea. Your age is 18 by Korean standards, you qualify. And there is no law preventing consensual marriage contracts. You're not a child, Anaya. You're a woman. A woman who can make her own decisions. While you hold the threat of deportation over my head, that's not consent. That's coercion. Call it what you like, Ri Zhang said. But we both know you're going to sign it anyway. And she did. She signed it with a pen that probably cost more than her computer, her hand shaking so badly that her signature was barely legible. And with that signature, she sealed her fate. She had come to Korea looking for freedom. Instead, she had found a beautiful, terrifying cage. The wedding was set for 2 months later. In that time, Anaya lived in Ri Zhang's penthouse like a bird in a gilded cage. She worked as his administrative assistant, managing his schedule, attending meetings, learning the business empire that had been built on connections she suspected were darker than anyone acknowledged. She wore clothes he bought for her, expensive, beautiful clothes that transformed her into someone she didn't recognize. She ate at restaurants where a single meal cost more than a week's worth of her old groceries. She lived a life that was objectively perfect and subjectively torturous. Because Ri Zhang watched her constantly. It wasn't threatening, not exactly. But it was inescapable. She would feel his eyes on her across a room, tracking her movements. She would turn around in the penthouse and find him standing behind her, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. He learned her habits, that she took her coffee with 2 sugars, that she hummed when she was concentrating, that she had a tell when she was lying. She blinked twice rapidly. He learned her schedule, her friends, her dreams. He knew more about her than she knew about herself. "Why are you staring at me?" she demanded one evening. They were in the living room of the penthouse, and she was attempting to study for her midterms while he read business reports on the couch. Every few minutes, she would catch him watching her. "Because you're beautiful," he said simply, like it was an obvious fact. "And because I can't believe you're here. I'm here because you forced me to be here." "No," Ri Jong set down his reports. "You're here because I saved you and because some part of you, however small, wanted to be saved by me instead of anyone else. That matters, Anaya. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change what this is. It doesn't change what you did." "What did I do?" He stood and moved toward her with that predatory grace that still made her nervous. "I saved your life. I offered you a chance to stay in the country you fought so hard to get to. I gave you a future. You took away my choice. Did I?" Ri Jong sat beside her, and she had to force herself not to move away. "I gave you a choice, Anaya. Deportation or marriage. Both options were real. Both options were yours to take. That's not a choice. That's coercion. Welcome to the world," he said quietly. "Nobody gets to choose the circumstances of their life. You can only choose how you respond to them. You chose to sign the contract. You chose to stay. Now you have to live with that choice." She hated him for that. She hated him for being right. She hated him for the way his logic was flawless and terrifying. She hated him most of all because sometimes, in the quiet moments of the penthouse, she caught herself almost forgetting to hate him. 2 weeks before the wedding, Anaya's friend from university, Kwang-soo, a kind-hearted engineering student who had helped her navigate Seoul's complicated public transportation system, came to the penthouse asking for her. Minjun turned him away, but not before Ri Jong knew exactly what was happening. That evening, he confronted her. "Kwang-soo called you 7 times today," he said. His voice was perfectly reasonable, but there was an edge underneath it that made her stomach clench. "You didn't answer." "How do you know that?" Anaya demanded. "Are you monitoring my phone?" "Of course. You live in my home. You work for me. I need to know who you're communicating with." He said it like this was obvious, like she was stupid for questioning it. "Who is Kwang-soo?" "A friend. A male friend." "Yes, a male friend. That's not a crime." Ri Jong's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something possessive and dangerous. "It is a crime when that male friend is attempting to convince you to leave me." "He's trying to help me escape," Anaya said. She felt a surge of defiance, and she clung to it. "He's trying to save me, which is more than I can say for." Ri Jong moved across the room so fast that she gasped. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body, could smell his expensive cologne, could see the barely controlled fury in his eyes. "Nobody saves you from me," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Nobody touches you. Nobody speaks to you without my knowledge. You are mine, Anaya. From today until the day one of us dies, you belong to me. Do you understand?" She should have been terrified. Part of her was terrified. But another part of her, a part she hated and feared in equal measure, felt something like relief at the clarity of his possessiveness. At least she knew where she stood. At least there was no pretense. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I understand." "Good." Ri Jong stepped back, and his expression shifted, became almost tender. He reached up and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. "I'm doing this because I love you, you know. You can't love someone you've known for less than 2 months. You can't love someone you're forcing to marry you." "I can," Ri Jong said. "I do. I love you, Anaya. I know you don't believe me yet. I know you think this is obsession. But you'll understand eventually. You'll understand that there's no difference between obsession and love when it comes to someone like me." Kwang-soo was never allowed to contact her again. His messages were blocked by some restriction Ri Jong had placed on her phone. When he tried to visit the penthouse, security turned him away with such finality that he eventually stopped trying. Anaya learned that this was what love looked like from Ri Jong, possessive, total, isolating. The wedding took place in a private ceremony at a luxury hotel, with only the necessary witnesses present. There was no joy to it, no celebration. It was a transaction conducted with precision and care. Anaya wore a white dress that Ri Jong had chosen for her. She wasn't allowed input, and it fit her perfectly, like it had been designed specifically for this moment. She repeated the vows that her lawyer read to her, words that made her feel like she was signing away her soul instead of promising her life. When Ri Jong slipped the ring on her finger, she felt the weight of it like a shackle. The reception was attended by business associates and people she didn't recognize. They congratulated them with knowing smiles, like they understood exactly what this marriage was. They toasted to Ri Jong's beautiful new wife, to the continuation of his empire, to the expansion of his power. Anaya existed in those toasts as an object, a possession, a strategic acquisition. When the evening was over, Ri Jong took her back to the penthouse. It was the first time she would sleep in his room, in his bed, as his wife. She was shaking as she changed into the nightgown he'd left for her, an expensive silk thing that felt like wearing nothing at all. He was already in bed when she emerged from the bathroom. The lighting was soft, the city lights creating shadows across his face. He watched her approach the bed with an expression that was almost hungry. "You look terrified," he observed. "I am terrified. Of me? Of everything. Of this. Of what this means." Ri Jong reached out and pulled her down beside him. She was stiff, every muscle in her body locked tight, but he didn't push. He simply held her against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "Not physically. I know that's probably hard to believe, but it's true. I would destroy anyone who laid a hand on you. I would destroy myself before I hurt you." "You're already hurting me," Anaya whispered. "You took away my choice. You took away my freedom." "I know." His fingers traced circles on her back. "I did take those things. And I would do it again. Because the alternative, you being taken away from me, you going back to Lagos, you marrying that man, was unacceptable to me. I would do anything, Anaya. Anything. Do you understand how terrifying that is for you? Do you understand what you have the power to do to me?" She didn't understand. She was 19 years old and living in a nightmare that looked like a dream, and she didn't understand anything except that she was trapped. The first weeks of marriage were strange and suffocating. Ri Jong was attentive in ways that felt more like surveillance. He knew her schedule down to the minute. He knew which professors she had and what they discussed. He knew which girls from her program she ate lunch with and what they talked about. He had Minjun trailing her when she left the penthouse, ostensibly for her protection, but really for his information. But he was also unexpectedly tender. He remembered that she liked honey in her tea. He brought home her favorite foods from the market. He had a library in the penthouse that he filled with books he thought she'd enjoy. He listened when she talked about her dreams, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. And most disturbing of all, he was slowly, systematically, making her feel less like a possession and more like a person he actually cared about. "Tell me about your family," he said one evening. They were in his study, and she was supposed to be working on her business administration coursework, but he had closed the laptop and pulled her to sit beside him on the expensive leather couch. "Why?" she asked warily. "Because I want to know you. Because I want to understand what shaped you into the woman you are." So she told him. She told him about her mother, who had married at 18 and spent the rest of her life regretting it. She told him about her father, who was a good man but a traditional one, who believed that women's education was a waste of resources better spent on finding them husbands. She told him about her sisters, 3 of them, each married off to men chosen by their parents, each living lives of quiet resignation. She told him about the moment she decided to leave, the night she applied for the scholarship, the terror and exhilaration of getting on a plane to a country where she knew no one. And Ri Jong listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply held her hand and listened to her voice and stored away every detail. When she was finished, he told her his story. He told her about the accident that had killed his mother when he was 6 years old. He told her about his father remarrying, about the stepmother who didn't want him, about being sent away to boarding school at age 8. He told her about his first love, a girl named Haewon who had been his assistant years ago, before he had the power and the darkness that now defined him. He told her about how he'd wanted to marry her, how he'd been planning to propose, how she'd been killed in a car accident by one of his business rivals who had been targeting him. After that, Ri Jong said, his voice hollow, "I promised myself I would never let anyone I loved slip away from me again. I built my empire not just for money or power, but for control. I wanted to reach into the world and grab the things that mattered to me and hold them so tight that nothing could ever take them away. And then I saw you. You didn't know me," Anaya said. "You didn't have any reason to think I mattered to you. I knew enough. I saw youth and innocence and a girl who was fighting so hard to keep her freedom. I saw Haewon. Or at least, I saw the possibility of Haewon. The possibility of a second chance. The possibility of getting it right this time." He turned to face her fully. "I know that's not fair to you. I know I'm projecting my trauma onto your life. But I don't know how to love any other way. I don't know how to not be possessive. And I'm sorry for that, but I won't apologize for saving you." Anaya felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something like understanding. Something like the first crack in the wall between them. "Why did you tell me all that?" she asked. "Because you needed to know that I'm not a monster. I'm a man who has been broken by loss and fear. And because I wanted you to understand that when I said you're mine, I meant that you're safe. Nothing will ever take you from me. Nothing will ever hurt you without answering to me." "That's still possession," Anaya said. But her voice was softer now. "Yes, but it's also love in the only way I know how to give it." After that conversation, something changed between them. It wasn't sudden, not a transformation that happened overnight. It was gradual, like erosion, like the slow wearing away of stone by water. Anaya stopped flinching when he touched her. She stopped tensing at the sound of his voice. She started having conversations with him that went beyond the surface, started asking him questions about himself, and actually wanting to know the answers. She also started noticing things she hadn't allowed herself to notice before. The way his face softened when he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The way he would rearrange his schedule to spend time with her. The way he trusted her in ways he didn't trust anyone else, letting her attend sensitive business meetings, letting her see documents that were obviously important, letting her into rooms of his life that were clearly guarded from everyone else. And most dangerous of all, she started to see the man beneath the obsession. She started to see Ri Jong not as a monster or a jailer, but as someone who had been broken and was desperate not to break again. Someone who loved her, yes, in a possessive and controlling way, but someone who was genuinely trying to be better. Someone who was, in his own twisted way, devoted to her safety and happiness. 3 months into their marriage, something happened that would change everything. They were returning from a charity event, one of the many social obligations that came with being married to Ri Jong. It was late, past midnight, and the streets of Seoul were quiet. Anaya was in a beautiful dress that he'd chosen for her, exhausted from smiling and playing the role of the perfect wife. The car pulled up to a red light, and that was when the other vehicles surrounded them. It happened so fast that Anaya barely had time to process what was happening. Black vans pulled up on either side of them. Men in dark clothing emerged, moving with military precision. Before Minjun could react, the car door was wrenched open, and hands reached in, grabbing at Anaya. She screamed. The sound barely left her throat before Ri Jong moved. He was between her and the attackers in an instant, his hand holding a gun that had appeared from somewhere. He fired without hesitation, the sound explosively loud in the enclosed space of the car. A man fell. Another took his place. "Run!" Ri Jong shouted at her, but there was nowhere to run. The penthouse was their only destination, and they were miles away. The only option was to stay in the car, to stay with him as more bullets flew, as the night exploded into chaos and violence. Minjun was screaming something into his phone. Ri Jong pushed Anaya down onto the floor of the car, shielding her body with his own as gunfire shattered the windows above them. Glass rained down, cutting his face, his shoulders, but he didn't flinch. He kept firing, kept protecting her, kept fighting like someone who had nothing left to lose. The attack lasted perhaps 5 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. When it was finally over, when the attackers realized they were outmatched and retreated into the night, Ri Zhang was bleeding from at least 3 bullet wounds. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice strained. He pulled out his phone with a hand that was shaking, not from fear, but from blood loss. "Get a medical team to the penthouse. Now." The drive to his building felt like it took hours. Anaya was cradled against his body, her hands pressed to his wounds, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. He was murmuring things to her, instructions on how to apply pressure, reassurances that he was fine, apologies that he'd put her in danger. "This is your world," she sobbed. "This violence, this darkness, this is what I've been trapped in." "I know," he whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, Anaya." By the time they reached the penthouse, the medical team was already there. They rushed Ri Zhang to a private room that was set up like a surgical suite. Apparently, having gunshot wounds treated was common enough in his life that he kept a fully equipped medical facility on site. Anaya was separated from him, forced into another room while a doctor in an expensive suit examined her for injuries. "You're not hurt," the doctor said, checking her pupils. "Physically, you're unharmed. Psychologically." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You should see someone about the trauma. What you witnessed tonight." "Where is he?" Anaya demanded. "Where's Ri Zhang?" "Resting. He's stable. The bullets didn't hit anything vital. He'll make a full recovery, though he'll be uncomfortable for several weeks." She pushed past the doctor and ran toward the room where they had taken him. Minjun tried to stop her, but she shoved past him. The sight of Ri Zhang stopped her cold. He was lying on the bed, his entire torso bandaged, his face pale beneath the wounds that had been cleaned and treated. He looked vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. He looked human, breakable, mortal. "Don't," he said when he saw her moving toward him. His voice was weak but commanding. "Don't come near me. I'm a danger to you. Everyone near me is a danger. You should leave. You should take the chance and run." "No," Anaya said. She sat on the edge of the bed carefully, trying not to jostle his injuries. "No, I'm not leaving. You should. You should hate me for putting you in that position. You should hate me for the life I've given you, for the violence that comes with being mine." "I do hate you," Anaya said. And it was true in a way. She hated him for everything he'd done, everything he'd forced her into. But she also knew, sitting in that room watching him bleed, that hate wasn't the only thing she felt. "But I'm not leaving." Ri Zhang tried to move toward her, but pain shot across his face. He gasped, gripping the sheets. "Don't move," Anaya commanded. She stood and began checking his bandages, making sure they were secure. She called the doctor back in and helped him change the dressings. She stayed by his bedside through the night, watching him sleep, watching his chest rise and fall, making sure he was breathing. And as she sat there in the dark, she realized that something fundamental had shifted. She had been given an out. Ri Zhang had told her to leave, had given her permission to hate him, had made it clear that she didn't have to stay. And she had chosen to anyway. Over the next 3 weeks, she became his nurse, his caretaker, his constant companion. She helped him bathe when his wounds were healing, but still too tender for him to manage on his own. She brought him food, changed his bandages, sat with him when the pain medication made him delirious, and he whispered secrets into the darkness. During one of these fevered nights, he gripped her hand with surprising strength. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured. "When they grabbed you, I thought I'd failed. I thought I'd let you be taken from me like I let Haewon be taken." "You saved me," Anaya said softly. "You protected me." "Because you're everything," Ri Zhang said. His eyes were unfocused, looking through her rather than at her. "You're the reason I breathe. You're the reason I've built all of this. You're why I'm still alive." She didn't pull away when he said these things. She understood now that they weren't romantic declarations the way normal men might make them. They were desperate affirmations from someone who had built his entire existence around the fear of loss. They were the truth as he understood truth. "I'm here," she said. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise me," Ri Zhang demanded, his eyes focusing on her face with sudden intensity. "Promise me you'll never leave me. Promise me you'll stay, even when you want to leave. Promise me you'll choose me." "I promise," Anaya said. And she meant it, which terrified her more than anything else. By the time Ri Jong was well enough to leave his bed, something had fundamentally changed in their relationship. The power dynamic hadn't shifted. If anything, he was more protective of her than ever. But her relationship to that power had transformed. She was no longer being held captive by it. She had become, in some way she couldn't quite articulate, complicit in her own captivity. She started wearing the ring he'd given her not like a shackle, but like a claim of her own making. When other women flirted with him at business events, she felt possessive rather than afraid. When he made decisions about her schedule or her life, she found herself defending those decisions to other people rather than resenting them. She also started to see the empire he was building, and she began to understand that her role in it was changing. Ri Jong started involving her in his business dealings in ways that were clearly unprecedented. He introduced her to his associates as not just his wife, but as his partner. He asked for her opinions on decisions that affected millions of won. He treated her like someone who mattered, not just to him personally, but to his entire operation. "Why are you showing me all of this?" she asked him one evening. They were in his private office, and he had just walked her through a deal involving property acquisition in Busan. "These are dangerous secrets. If I ever wanted to hurt you, this information would be valuable." "I know," Ri Jong said calmly. He was working on his laptop, moving money between accounts with the ease of someone who had been doing it his entire life. "I'm choosing to trust you with them anyway." "Why?" "Because you're my wife. Because you've shown me that I can trust you. Because I believe that if you ever wanted to hurt me, you would have done it already." He turned to look at her. "But mostly because I want you to understand what I am. I want you to know the full darkness of my world and choose to stay anyway." "And if I don't choose to stay?" Anaya asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then I would kill anyone involved in your leaving. I would burn Seoul to the ground if it meant keeping you. And I would probably kill myself afterward." He said it so matter-of-factly that it took her a moment to realize the enormity of what he was saying. "So I suppose the question isn't whether you have a choice. The question is whether you want one." Months passed. Anaya finished her degree in business administration with honors while working as her husband's unofficial advisor and business partner. She moved through Seoul society with the kind of power that came from being married to Ri Jong, and she found that she had her own reputation now, separate from him. People respected her. People feared her. People knew that the quiet girl who had arrived as a scared refugee was now a woman to be reckoned with. She also made peace with certain realities. She wasn't going to leave Ri Jong. She didn't want to leave him anymore. Her freedom, which had once been the most important thing to her, had become less important than the connection they had built. The cage that had seemed so suffocating in the beginning had transformed into something else entirely, not a cage, but a choice. A choice she made every single day to be with him, to accept his darkness, to exist in the complicated space between love and obsession. But other people weren't willing to let her make peace with that reality. 6 months after the attack that had nearly taken Ri Jong from her, Anaya's past came back to haunt her. There was a man, a member of her father's church back in Lagos, a man she had met exactly twice before leaving Nigeria. His name was James, and he had been sent specifically by her father to bring her home. He showed up at the university where she was giving a guest lecture on business strategy, a lecture that Ri Jong had encouraged her to give. He stood in the back of the auditorium and waited for her to finish. When she saw him, she felt her blood run cold. "Anaya," he said as she gathered her papers. He approached with a smile that was meant to be friendly, but came across as predatory. "Your father sent me. He's very concerned about you. He wants you to come home." "I am home," Anaya said flatly. "Seoul is my home now." "You were coerced into marriage," James said, lowering his voice. "I know what happened. I know this man forced you. Your father has hired lawyers. You can get out of this. You can come back to Lagos and start over with your family. Properly." "My family wanted to sell me to a man old enough to be my grandfather," Anaya said. "Ri Jong may have manipulated me into marriage, but at least he didn't pretend it was anything other than what it was. He was honest about his obsession. My father lied and called it love." "So you've chosen this?" James looked genuinely confused. "You've chosen to stay with a man who clearly has mafia ties, who's involved in God knows what illegal activities, who keeps you isolated from the world?" Yes, Anaya said. She looked him in the eye. I've chosen this. Now please leave before you cause problems you're not equipped to handle. But James didn't leave. He kept calling her, kept showing up at places he knew she would be, kept trying to convince her that she was being held prisoner by a man she'd been brainwashed to love. It would have been pathetic if it weren't so dangerous. She didn't tell Ri Zhang about James at first. Something stopped her, an instinct of self-preservation, perhaps, or a desire to protect herself from the violence she knew Ri Zhang would unleash if he found out. But secrets in a marriage built on control and possession never stayed hidden for long. Ri Zhang found out when Minjun reported that James had been following her movements. When she admitted that her father had sent him, that he'd been trying to convince her to leave, Ri Zhang's response was calculated and terrifying. He didn't rage. He didn't threaten. He simply informed her that James would be leaving Seoul immediately, that her father would receive a message that his daughter was no longer available for retrieval, and that if anyone from her past ever tried to contact her again, they would face consequences that Anaya didn't need to be aware of. You're protecting me, she said. I'm protecting what's mine, Ri Zhang corrected. There's a difference. You belong to me, Anaya. Your past doesn't get to claim you. Your family doesn't get to have you. No one gets to have you except me. She should have hated him for those words. Instead, she found herself leaning into them, finding comfort in the absolute certainty of his devotion. A year into their marriage, Anaya realized that she had fallen completely in love with the man she had once despised. It wasn't the kind of love that appeared in fairy tales or romantic novels. It was darker, more complicated, more real. It was a love built on understanding, on shared darkness, on the acknowledgement that they were both broken in ways that only the other could mend. I love you, she told him one evening. They were in their bedroom, and she had just said the words that she knew would change everything. I know that you already knew I did. I know you can see it in everything I do, but I needed to say it out loud. I love you, Ri Zhang. I love you despite everything, because of everything. Ri Zhang was very still. His expression was unreadable in the way it was when he was processing something that had deep emotional weight. Say it again, he commanded. I love you. Again. I love you, Ri Zhang. I love you. He pulled her against his chest and held her so tightly that she could barely breathe. She felt his body shake with emotion, whether it was joy or terror or some combination of both, she couldn't tell. You're everything to me, he whispered into her hair. You're the reason I'm still sane. You're the reason I haven't let the darkness consume me completely. You're my anchor, Anaya. You're my redemption. She understood now that this was what he had been seeking all along. Not just possession, not just control, but genuine love. The kind of love that came from someone choosing him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The kind of love that came from someone who had seen the worst of him and decided to stay anyway. But their happiness was precarious, balanced on a knife's edge. Because Ri Zhang had enemies, and those enemies knew now that Anaya was his greatest weakness. The attack came without warning. It was early morning, and Anaya was alone in the penthouse. Ri Zhang was at a business meeting across town, and Minjun had stepped out to get coffee. She was making breakfast, standing at the stove with music playing softly from the speakers, when the windows exploded inward. Before she could scream, strong arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her away from the glass. Multiple men in masks poured through the windows and doors. This wasn't a random attack. This was coordinated, professional, and clearly aimed at taking her alive. She fought. She clawed and kicked and tried to scream, but a cloth was pressed over her mouth, not hard enough to choke her, but enough to muffle the sound. She felt the prick of a needle in her neck, and the world began to spin. The last thing she thought before consciousness slipped away was that Ri Zhang would destroy the world to find her. She woke in a concrete room with a single window high up on the wall, too high to reach even if she climbed. There was a cot, a toilet, a sink. Nothing else. The room was cold and smelled like mold and desperation. She had no idea how long she'd been unconscious, no idea where she was, no idea what her captors wanted with her. Hours later, or perhaps days, time was impossible to track, a man entered the room. He was tall, muscular, with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He carried a folder and a gun. Ri-jong Kim is trying very hard to find you, he said. His voice had a slight accent that Anaya couldn't place. He's burning soul down looking for you. He's made a lot of enemies very nervous. That works for us. What do you want? Anaya asked. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. Simple leverage. We want him to know that you're here, that you're ours, and that if he doesn't step down from his position and hand over his business to us, you die. Slowly. Painfully. Completely. The man smiled, and it was an expression devoid of all humanity. You're his weakness, you see. We watched him protect you from that attack months ago. We saw how he would sacrifice anything for you. So we're going to give him a choice, his empire or your life. Anaya's heart was pounding so hard she thought it would break through her ribs. But she forced herself to keep her expression neutral, to not show the fear that was threatening to overwhelm her. He'll choose me, she said quietly. We're counting on it, the man said. That's why you're valuable. After he left, Anaya sat on the cot and assessed her situation. The room had no obvious way out. The walls were reinforced concrete. The window was too high. The door was made of steel and locked from the outside. She had nothing to use as a weapon, nothing to use as a tool. She was completely at the mercy of her captors. But she had learned a lot in her time with Ri-jong. She had learned that the most powerful thing wasn't physical strength or weapons, it was information. And she had information that these men didn't realize she had. She began to memorize details. She listened to the patterns of the guards, the sound of their footsteps, the rhythm of their check-ins. She noted the way the light filtered through the high window, calculating the direction based on the angle of the sun. She studied the door lock, trying to understand its mechanism. She was constructing a map of her prison, and more importantly, she was constructing a plan. 3 days into her captivity, she had marked them on the concrete wall with a piece of broken glass. The man with the scar came back. Ri-jong received our message, he said. He's been making inquiries. Looks like you really are his weak point. He looked at her with something approximating respect. I've got to admit, you're handling this better than I expected. Most women would be hysterical by now. I'm not most women, Anaya said. She had been sitting on the cot, waiting, and now she stood and approached him slowly, carefully. I'm his wife. Which means I'm also strong. The man watched her approach, his hand resting on his gun. What are you doing? Trying to negotiate, Anaya said. She was close to him now, close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. You want leverage on Ri-jong, right? You want him to suffer, to sacrifice, to lose something. But you have to understand he's going to come for me. Not to save me, but to destroy anyone who's taken me. You're not going to win this negotiation. You're going to die. She said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that the man actually stepped back. You're either crazy or you love him more than your own life, he observed. Both, Anaya said. So if you're smart, you'll let me go. You'll disappear. You'll leave Seoul and never come back. Because when Ri-jong finds you, and he will find you, you're going to wish you'd never been born. The man laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. He turned and left without saying another word. Anaya went back to her cot and returned to planning. She had given them fair warning. Now she needed to make sure she was gone before Ri-jong decided which buildings to burn down. That night, she noticed something she had missed before. The lock on the door had a weakness, a slight gap that widened slightly when the guard passed through it. If she could create something thin enough, something that could slide through that gap and hit the locking mechanism inside. She had the broken glass, and she had time. She began working on fashioning a tool, scraping it against the concrete floor, shaping it slowly, carefully. It took her 2 days. On the 3rd day, with a piece of glass sharpened to a razor's edge and bound to a piece of metal from the bed spring, she waited for the guard to check on her. When the door opened, she moved with the speed that fear and desperation provided. She didn't hesitate, didn't think about consequences. She drove the makeshift blade into the guard's neck, not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to incapacitate. The guard fell, blood pouring from his wound, and Anaya didn't allow herself to feel guilt or horror. She stepped over him and ran into the corridor beyond. The building was a warehouse, she realized as she navigated through corridors lined with boxes and machinery. It was large and confusing, but she moved with purpose, listening for voices and avoiding them. She found a door that led to the outside world, and she didn't stop running until she was 3 blocks away. She had no phone, no money, no identification. She was bleeding from a cut on her arm where she'd scraped herself on something during her escape. But she was alive, and she was free. She found a police station and told them she'd been kidnapped. She told them her name and her husband's name, and she watched the officers' faces change as they realized who she was, the wife of Ri Jong Kim, a name that was apparently known even to the Seoul Police Department in ways that suggested corruption and compromise. They took her to a hospital where she was examined and declared physically sound despite her ordeal. They took her statement. And then, while she was still being processed, Ri Jong arrived. He looked like death. His face was gaunt, his eyes wild, his hair disheveled in a way she'd never seen before. He took in her appearance in seconds, and something primal and violent moved across his features. "I'm okay," Anaya said quickly, moving toward him. "I'm fine. I escaped. He pulled her against him so hard that the breath was knocked out of her. He held her like someone who was afraid to let go, like the moment he released her she would disappear. "I'm going to kill them," he said into her hair. His voice was steady, but she could feel him shaking. "I'm going to kill every single person involved. I'm going to make them understand what it means to take what's mine." "Let them go," Anaya said. She pulled back to look at him. "Please. I don't want more violence. I don't want more death. I want to go home. I want to go back to the penthouse, and I want to be with you, and I want to pretend that this never happened." "I can't let them go," Ri Jong said. "They took you. They threatened you. They made me feel that terror." "I know," Anaya said. She took his face in her hands. "I know it was hard for you. But I'm asking you, as your wife, as the person who loves you most, let them go. Let me be the reason you become someone better." For a long moment, Ri Jong didn't respond. She could see the battle playing out behind his eyes, the desire for vengeance warring with his love for her, with his need to give her what she was asking for. Finally, he nodded. It was the smallest movement, but it was there. "For you," he said. "I'll let them go. But if I ever hear that they're in Korea again, all bets are off." The men who had kidnapped her were given a message: leave the country, never return, or die. They left within 48 hours. Ri Jong took Anaya home to the penthouse, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw him let something go. The stranglehold of his obsession loosened, just slightly. He stopped monitoring her phone. He stopped arranging for her to be followed. He started trusting her in ways that went beyond the surface level, trusting her with his vulnerability, his pain, his fears. "I'm sorry," he said one evening. They were in bed, and he was tracing patterns on her shoulder. "I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I'm sorry for forcing you into marriage. I'm sorry for the way I've controlled you. I'm sorry for making you love me when you should have hated me." "You don't get to apologize now," Anaya said, but her voice was gentle. "You made me into this. You made me someone who can love a man like you. So accept responsibility for that, and then move forward with me." "What do you want?" Ri Jong asked. "If you could have anything, if you could change anything, what would it be?" Anaya thought about it. She thought about the girl she had been when she first came to Seoul, desperate and hopeful and certain that freedom was all she needed. She thought about who she had become, powerful, dark, devoted to a man who had torn her apart and put her back together. She thought about the choices she had made, and she realized that none of them felt like mistakes anymore. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to be your wife. I want to be part of your business empire. I want to be someone dangerous in my own right. And I want you to trust me enough to be someone better than you were." Ri Jong smiled, and it was the softest smile she'd ever seen from him. "You're already all of those things. You already have been since the moment I first saw you." A year later, Anaya stood beside her husband at a charity gala in downtown Seoul. She was wearing a dress that she had chosen herself, though Ri Jong had approved it. She had designed the event herself, a fundraiser for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds seeking to study abroad. The event was raising money for scholarships, for opportunities, for freedom. Ri Jong watched her work the room with pride evident in his eyes. She had become his equal, his partner, his counterbalance. The girl he had stolen from her own future was now a woman who had reclaimed it and transformed it into something extraordinary. Between conversations, she found him watching her. What? She asked. I was just thinking, he said, about the day I saw you standing outside my building. Do you remember? How could I forget? You had me abducted. I saved you, he corrected. And in doing so, I saved myself. She took his hand. We saved each other. That's what this is. That's what we are. Later that evening, after the gala was over and they were back at the penthouse, Ri-jong pulled her close and asked her a question that changed everything again. Do you want children? He asked quietly. Anaya went very still. It was a question she had never considered, a future she had never allowed herself to imagine. A family with him meant creating life in the shadow of his darkness. It meant raising children who would inherit both his power and his trauma. It meant becoming not just his wife, but his legacy. Yes, she said finally. But only if you promise to be different for them. Only if you promise to break the cycle. Ri-jong was silent for a long moment. I can't promise I'll be a normal father. I can't promise I won't be possessive or protective to the point of dysfunction. But I can promise to try. I can promise to be better for them than anyone was for me. That's enough, Anaya said. That's more than enough. 5 years later, they had twins. A boy and a girl. Ri-jong was, as predicted, a possessive and overprotective father. But he was also present in a way he had never been present for anything in his life. He attended school events. He helped with homework. He taught his daughter how to be dangerous and his son how to respect women who were dangerous in their own way. Anaya had become the unofficial CFO of Ri-jong's business empire. She made decisions that affected millions of people. She was respected and feared in equal measure. And every evening, she came home to a man who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The obsession had transformed into devotion. The possession had become partnership. The darkness had learned to share space with light, though the light never quite managed to eliminate the shadows. They were not a fairy tale. They were not a perfect love story. But they were real, rawer, and more honest than most relationships that existed. They were two broken people who had found that their fractures fit perfectly together. And in that fitting together, in that understanding that they would never be normal or conventional or entirely healthy, they had found something that was, in its own dark way, beautiful. Anaya sometimes thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Seoul. That girl had wanted freedom above all else. She had seen Ri-jong as a captor, a monster, a force designed to strip her of choice and agency. But standing in the penthouse, watching her husband sleep, seeing her children's toys scattered across the floor of what had once been a sterile showcase of wealth, Anaya realized that freedom was a much more complicated concept than she had ever understood. True freedom wasn't about the absence of constraints. It was about choosing your constraints consciously, with full knowledge of what they meant and what they cost. She had chosen this life. She had chosen this man. She had chosen to let herself be possessed because in return, she received something more valuable than freedom. She received purpose. She received partnership. She received love, even if that love looked different from what she had expected. The bride he stole from youth was no longer a victim of theft. She was a willing accomplice in her own captivity, and in that willing captivity, she had found more agency and power than she'd ever possessed when she thought she was free. The story doesn't end here. It never really ends. Every evening, Ri-jong comes home to a woman who loves him despite knowing exactly what he is capable of. Every morning, Anaya wakes up beside a man who would burn the world to keep her safe. Their love is possessive and dark and complicated, but it is real. It is honest. It is theirs. The question that haunts them both is whether it's redemption or ruin. Whether they've saved each other or destroyed each other. The answer is that it's both simultaneously, and they wouldn't want it any other way. Subscribe now to see what happens next. What did you think? Is their love a tragedy or a triumph? Like this video if you believe in second chances and dark redemptions. Comment your favorite moment and tell us whether Anaya should have stayed or escaped. This story explores obsession, consent, and the blurred lines between love and control. What do you think? Is there such a thing as a love that's too dark? 10 years after that first encounter outside Ri-jong's building, Anaya stood in a boardroom filled with executives and lawyers, and she controlled the room with a single glance. She was 30 now, a woman in her prime, carrying herself with the kind of power that came from having survived the worst and chosen to keep surviving anyway. Ri Zhang sat beside her, and though he was technically the head of the empire, everyone in the room knew that the real decisions came from her. They were negotiating the acquisition of a tech company, a brilliant startup founded by a young woman who had reminded Anaya of herself all those years ago. The girl was nervous, intimidated by the sheer presence of Ri Zhang's wealth and influence. But Anaya had caught her eye and winked, a small gesture that said, "I was you once. You're stronger than you think." After the meeting, after the contracts were signed and the executives had filed out, the young woman approached Anaya in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for that look. I almost backed out. I almost let them intimidate me into accepting less than what I deserve." Anaya smiled. "Never accept less than what you deserve. Not from anyone. And if someone tries to force you into a corner, find a way to make that corner your throne." She paused. "Do you have someone at home? Someone who supports you?" "I have a boyfriend," the girl said. "But we're not serious. I wanted to focus on my career." "Good," Anaya said. "Keep it that way until you're sure. Love is complicated, especially when there's a power imbalance. Make sure any man in your life respects your power instead of trying to diminish it." It was advice she had learned the hard way. Ri Zhang had never diminished her power, but that was because she had fought for it, had demanded it, had refused to be anything less than his equal. She wondered sometimes what would have happened if she had been weaker, if she had allowed his obsession to consume her entirely instead of learning to weaponize it. That evening, she told Ri Zhang about the conversation. "You're trying to save her," he observed. They were in their private study, and he was reviewing documents while she worked on her own projects on the other side of the desk. "I'm trying to make sure she doesn't make the same mistakes I made," Anaya corrected. "Though they weren't all mistakes, were they? Without you, I'd be married to someone my father chose. Without you, I'd have never discovered what I was capable of. Without you, I'd have destroyed myself years ago," Ri Zhang said. He looked up from his papers. "I think we're even." "More than even," Anaya said. "I think we're exactly what we need to be for each other." But life, as Anaya had learned, was rarely that simple. Ri Zhang's past had a way of reaching forward and demanding payment. 3 months after the tech company acquisition, there was a knock on the door of their penthouse in the middle of the night. Minjun, who had become less of an assistant and more of a trusted member of their inner circle, brought news that made Ri Zhang's entire body go rigid. "Sir, there's someone downstairs requesting to see you. She says it's urgent. She says it concerns the past." Anaya watched her husband's face go pale. "Who is it?" "A woman. She says her name is Minna. She says she's your sister." The word hung in the air like a bomb. Anaya knew that Ri Zhang had a sister. He'd mentioned her years ago, had referred to her as though she was dead or estranged. But clearly she wasn't dead. Clearly she was downstairs, demanding an audience. "I'll see her," Ri Zhang said. His voice was steady, but Anaya could feel the tension radiating off him. "Alone." "No," Anaya said. "Whatever this is, I'm part of your life now. I'm coming with you." They descended together. Minna was standing in the living room, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that were unmistakably the same shade as Ri Zhang's. But where his eyes held hardness and control, hers held pain and regret. She turned when she heard them enter, and she studied Anaya with an intensity that made it clear she had come to evaluate, not to reconcile. "So this is the famous wife," Minna said. Her voice carried the same dangerous edge as her brother's. "The girl you stole from her own future." "Sister," Ri Zhang said, his voice controlled but cold. "It's been a long time." "Too long," Minna said. "And not nearly long enough, depending on how you look at it. Do you have any idea what our father has been saying about you? Do you know that he's dying and his last wish is to see you before he goes?" Something shifted in Ri Zhang's expression, pain, quickly suppressed. "Our father stopped being my concern a very long time ago. He was a terrible man," Minna said. "That much is true. He was cruel and selfish, and he destroyed people, especially us. But he's still our father. And he's dying. He's asked me to come here and beg you to see him. To let him apologize before he dies." "I don't need his apologies," Ri Zhang said. "Maybe not," Minna said. But I think you might need something else. I think you might need to let go of the anger that's been eating you alive for 45 years. She looked at Anaya. Is that what you were supposed to do? Is that why he became obsessed with you? Is that why he stole you to have something he could control when he couldn't control anything else? Anaya felt the question like a blade, cutting through years of comfort and understanding. She looked at her husband, seeing the truth flickering across his face before he had time to hide it. Come sit, Anaya said to Minna. She gestured to the couch, and to her surprise, the older woman sat. Ri-jong remained standing, but Anaya placed a hand on his arm, keeping him grounded. Tell us about your father. Tell us what happened. Minna talked for 2 hours. She told them about a man who had built an empire on the backs of broken people, who had seen his children as either assets or liabilities. She told them about Ri-jong being sent away to boarding school at 8 because he was too soft, too emotional, too much like his mother. She told them about Ri-jong coming back at 18, hardened and dangerous, already learning the family business. She told them about the first love, Haewon, and how their father had had her killed not because Ri-jong had angered him, but simply because Ri-jong had shown weakness by loving her. After that, Minna said, Ri-jong stopped being my brother. He became a machine. He built the empire. He became powerful. And he's spent every year since then trying to prevent anyone from ever taking anything from him again. She looked at Anaya. But you broke through that. You got past the defenses. You made him human again. I made him my prisoner, Anaya said quietly. Yes, Minna said without judgment. And he made you his redemption. That's how it works with people like you two. You're either going to destroy each other or save each other. It looks like you've done both. Why did you come? Ri-jong asked. His voice was rough. Not for our father. You wouldn't have come here after all these years just to ask me to see a dying man. Because he's asking for you, Minna said. Because he's spent 50 years being a monster, and in his final months, he wants to try to be a father. I don't know if that's redemption or cowardice. I just know that I promised I would try to bring you to him. Ri-jong was silent for a long moment. Anaya could feel the war happening inside him, the battle between the child who had been abandoned and the man who had built himself from those broken pieces. I'll go, he said finally. But not to forgive him. Not to absolve him of what he's done. I'll go to say goodbye to the man who created me and then move forward knowing that cycle ends with me. They went to the hospital in the morning. Their father was in a private room, hooked up to machines that were doing the work his failing body could no longer manage. He looked small, diminished, nothing like the titan of industry that Ri-jong had described. He was just an old man waiting to die. My son, he whispered when Ri-jong entered the room. Anaya stayed in the doorway, giving them space but not leaving. She was his anchor now, his witness. I came, Ri-jong said. He didn't move to embrace his father, didn't reach for his hand. He simply stood at the end of the bed, waiting. I was a terrible father, the old man said. I can't undo that. I can't go back and be the man you needed me to be. But I can tell you that everything I taught you about power and control and fear, I was wrong. I was teaching you to survive in a world that didn't have to be that way. You were teaching me to be you, Ri-jong said. Yes, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. The old man's eyes moved to Anaya. This is your wife? Yes, Ri-jong said. Her name is Anaya. She's not what I expected, the father said. She's stronger than I thought you'd choose. She's exactly what I chose, Ri-jong said. She's why I'm here, and she's why I won't become you. His father died 3 days later. Ri-jong grieved in his own way, not with tears or loud expressions of pain, but with a kind of grim acceptance. He had just lost the man who had shaped him, but he had also been freed from the ghost that had haunted him for decades. After the funeral, after he had buried his father alongside his mother in a cemetery on the outskirts of Seoul, Ri-jong made a decision that changed everything. I want to start a foundation, he told Anaya. They were in their study, and he was looking at papers, making notes in his precise handwriting. A foundation for young people who are trapped by family, by circumstance, by people with power over them. A foundation that gives them the same kind of lifeline I gave you. You want to save other people? Anaya asked carefully. She was learning that her husband's motivations were never simple. I want to save people before they become like me, Ri-jong said. I want to intervene before they build their entire lives around fear and control. I want to give them a choice earlier than I gave you one. That's not redemption, Anaya said. That's just good business. Maybe, Ri-jong said. But it's what I can do. It's what I want to do. The foundation became his obsession, redirected from possessing Anaya to possessing purpose. He poured money and resources into it. He worked with NGOs and government agencies. He created programs that gave scholarships to people in difficult circumstances, jobs for refugees, counseling for victims of trafficking and abuse. And Anaya, predictably, took over operations and made it even more effective than his initial vision had been. Their children grew up knowing that their father was powerful and that their mother was powerful in her own way. They grew up understanding that love could be complicated and dark and still be real. They grew up watching their parents build something meaningful from the ashes of obsession and trauma. Years passed. Anaya turned 35, then 40. Ri-jong turned 60, and though he was still powerful, still feared, still dangerous when necessary, there was a softness to him now that hadn't existed before. It was a softness that only Anaya could see, but she saw it every day in the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he had learned to trust her completely. One evening, almost 20 years after that first day she stood crying outside his building, they sat on the balcony of their penthouse and watched Seoul glitter below them. Their children were away at university, building their own lives, making their own choices. For the first time in years, they were alone in their domain, with nothing to do but exist together. Do you regret it? Ri-jong asked. Any of it? Anaya considered the question seriously. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate, hopeful, certain that freedom was all she needed. She thought about the woman she had become, powerful, complex, someone who had learned to make peace with her own darkness. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. It wasn't what I would have chosen. It wasn't the path I thought I wanted to take. But it was the path that led me to become myself. And that's worth more than freedom. I still don't deserve you, Ri-jong said. Maybe not, Anaya agreed. But I choose you anyway. I've chosen you every single day for 20 years. And I'll keep choosing you for as long as we both live. Ri-jong took her hand and brought it to his lips. It was a gesture that was old-fashioned, romantic, completely unlike the dangerous man he had been. But that was the thing about transformation, it was always subtle, always incomplete, always a work in progress. I love you, he said simply. I know, Anaya said. I've always known. That's the problem. He laughed, a real laugh, and she leaned against him as they watched their city breathe in the darkness. They were not a conventional love story. They were not a story that would ever appear in movies or novels meant for mass consumption. They were a story of two people who had been broken and had chosen to break each other further before finding a way to rebuild. But sitting there on the balcony, with Seoul glittering at their feet and the future stretching before them, Anaya realized that she wouldn't change a single thing. Not the obsession, not the possession, not the slow erosion of her resistance. All of it, every painful moment, every terrifying decision, every surrender, and every conquest had led her here. Had led her to become a woman who could stand beside a man like Ri-jong and match him darkness for darkness, strength for strength. The bride he stole from youth had become something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She had become a partner in his empire, a queen in his dark kingdom, a woman who could destroy him if she wanted to and chose not to every single day. That choice to stay, to love, to build something meaningful from something that had begun in manipulation and fear was the most powerful thing she had ever possessed. 25 years after their first meeting, Ri-jong and Anaya hosted a gala at the Foundation's headquarters. The building was a beautiful structure of glass and steel, and its walls were lined with photographs of young people whose lives had been changed by their work. They had saved hundreds of people from situations similar to Anaya's own, trapped, desperate, with nowhere to turn. Their daughter was now running the International Outreach Program. Their son was a lawyer, specializing in cases of coercion and trafficking. Both children understood that they came from darkness and had been raised to transform that darkness into something that saved other people. Anaya stood in the lobby, greeting donors and attendees, when she caught sight of herself in one of the mirrored walls. She was in her mid-50s now, her hair streaked with silver, her face marked by the years she had lived. She was still beautiful, but in a different way than she had been at 19. She was beautiful because she had survived, because she had chosen, because she had built something meaningful from the wreckage of her own captivity. Ri Zhang found her there, studying her reflection. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the girl who stood outside your building, crying like her entire world had ended," Anaya said. "I'm thinking about how she couldn't have imagined that this is where she would end up. That we would end up here. Do you think she would approve?" Ri Zhang asked. "No," Anaya said. "I think she would still be terrified of you. But I think she would also understand that sometimes the person who saves you is the same person who destroys you. And that doesn't make the saving any less real." They stood together, watching their reflection in the mirrored wall, two people who had begun as captor and captive and had become something far more complicated and real. They were not heroes of their own story. They were not villains either. They were simply two broken people who had found that their brokenness fit together perfectly. The gala continued around them, but Anaya and Ri Zhang existed in their own small pocket of the world, the eye of the hurricane they had created together. And in that quiet space, in that moment of understanding, they were finally at peace. The bride he stole from youth had become the woman he built an empire with. And that was a far more powerful ending than any fairy tale could ever provide. Final message to viewers. What you've witnessed in this story is not a traditional romance. It's a study in obsession, consent, power, and the gray areas that exist between right and wrong. It's a story about what happens when two damaged people find each other and build something that shouldn't work but somehow does. The truth is, Anaya and Ri Zhang's love is complicated. It shouldn't be celebrated in the way we celebrate conventional romances. But it should be understood. Because understanding the darkness in people, the trauma that drives them, the fears that control them, is the first step to transformation. Anaya chose to stay. She chose to build a life with a man who had forced her into marriage. But that choice came after years of refusing to be diminished, after fighting to become his equal, after learning that her power was not something he could take from her, it was something she had to claim for herself. That's the real message of this story. Not that obsessive love is romantic. Not that possession is the same as devotion. But that transformation is possible. Redemption is possible. And sometimes, healing comes from the most unexpected places. Subscribe to see more stories that explore the darkness and light in human relationships. Like if you believe that people can change, that trauma can be transformed, that broken things can be rebuilt into something beautiful. Comment your thoughts. Do you think Anaya and Ri Zhang's love is redemption or ruin? Do you believe people can truly change? Let's discuss in the comments below. And if you or someone you know is in a situation where you feel trapped or controlled, please reach out. There are organizations dedicated to helping people escape situations of coercion and abuse. Your freedom matters. Your choice matters. You matter. Share this story if you know someone who needs to understand that transformation is possible. Share it if you believe in second chances. Share it if you understand that the line between love and obsession is thinner than most people realize. Thank you for watching The Bride He Stole from Youth. Until next time, remember, the most dangerous love is the love you choose despite knowing exactly what it costs.